Now, three teenagers driven by racial hatred, or racism plainly, were behind the swatting calls that brought major police responses to the home of one of the leading Black Lives Matter activists in Los Angeles. The juveniles are accused of two swatting calls. Now, real quick, for those who don't know, swatting is when you call the police and have authorities sent out to a location when there is not an emergency there. It's quite honestly a false alarm. Now, they sent that targeting the home of Melina Abdullah, a co-founder of BLM-LA. The teenagers, aged 13 to 16, connected through social media and are suspected of causing, get this, more than 30 bomb threats and swatting incidences across the country. As we mentioned earlier, swatting refers to these phony emergency calls that were made to attract police to particular addresses without cause. We're going to bring our panel in for those two stories, talking about the deputies in Georgia as well as the swatting calls. Michael, I'll start with you. We started our show listening to and thinking about and receiving the news about the teenager, Kyle Rittenhouse, getting out for murder. A teenager. And now we're again seeing teenagers motivated by their racial animus, or quite simply racism, if we don't want to use those $20 words. But we also know that as a society that's going to be humane, we should have justice and mercy and kindness and understanding of teenagers. How do we balance those two competing ideas, that racism is causing harm to our people, but we also recognize the humanity in teenagers?
Good question, Ray. Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that racism exists, because you have a lot of people who are in denial, especially a lot of Republicans who say racism doesn't exist. That's in the past. Racism is a system of advantage and privilege distributed based upon race, which comes out of the ideology of European white supremacy for the purpose of preserving genetic white survival. Racism is a system. So you first have to start there. And this is one of the things that critical race theory targets and looks at how laws and policies historically and today continue to oppress non-white people, especially African Americans. But when we look at Kyle Rittenhouse, that was a tough case to prosecute. One. Two, I didn't think he was going to be convicted. Okay, having watched some of the trial, and then also when the prosecution star witness testified that he raised, who was armed also, that he raised his pistol at Kyle Rittenhouse, then that gave bolstered Kyle Rittenhouse's self-defense claim. So when we look at Melina Abdullah, and I actually saw an interview that she did dealing with this swatting incident, hopefully these three white teenagers operating out of white supremacy and racism, hopefully they'll be prosecuted fully, because this is very serious. She could have been killed, okay? She could have been killed with these swatting incidences. So this is another reason why the real history of this country has to be taught in schools, okay? See, Americans are very, very ignorant of history. And you also have this false lost cause myth that's been pushed for about the last 150 or so years, dealing with the fact that the Civil War, or the myth that the Civil War was fought over states' rights, which totally distorts all this history post-Civil War, Reconstruction era, et cetera. So one, I'm glad the sister is still alive and can still talk about what happened. Two, these teenagers need to be prosecuted to the full extent of the law.
Candace, we think about the idea of racism and the states' rights that Michael alluded to, and quite honestly, it was a matter of state rights. The states' rights to be racist and continue to move slavery across the country. But so many Americans, particularly those who may not be sympathetic to where I presume, and forgive me for assumptions, the four of us might stand, would say, what's the big deal? No one was hurt. It's not a problem. We should just relax, give them a slight slap on the wrist, and call it a day. How would you respond to the critics who may say that?
Well, first of all, disclosure, Melina Abdullah was my roommate at Howard University. But I will say this. Yeah, these young men who went online, first of all, got together and allowed themselves to get riled up the same way that Kyle Rittenhouse did, the same way that Travis McMichael did, going online and using these galvanizing people around them to support what they did. they do need to be made examples of. The same way that Kyle Rittenhouse has set a precedent, vigilante is allowed to do when they go out on the street, have a gun when they're 17 years old, have their mother drive them across state lines in order to carry out a mission that was never assigned to them. We need precedent here. Melina could have died. Her children could have died. They put her whole family at risk over and over again. So I don't think that they should really tread lightly, especially when these teenagers are smarter than we think. They know all about it. I mean, they are joining groups and they are, online, creating discord in more ways than we imagine. Let us not underestimate how smart they are. Of course, let us not, underestimate how stupid they can be too. But if we let these people go, what does that say about how we see this act, which, as you said, could have led to her death? And that's really what the question is here. Why are we allowing them or why would we allow them to continue to do this and not go hard on them when someone could have died? We've seen people die in lesser situations.
Kelly, I think it's fascinating that Candace introduced the word Discord, because there's actually a communication platform called Discord that so many young people engage on and communicate with one another. Again, we're going to get into a place where we have to do some balancing here. And you as a communications professional, I'm curious how you see this. How do we balance that we police this digital space where so much of the grounds that is ultimately leading to harm for our people, for people who care about justice, the conversations on the internet? How do we police that space to ensure the collective safety of all of us, while also providing the freedom that we need to be able to communicate freely with one another?
I mean, that's an excellent question. And honestly, that question stems from how we view the First Amendment. I think that traditional press and media has done a fairly excellent job regarding what can be published, what can't be published, the whole notion, especially in journalism, of trust but verify, and then verify again. Even though the First Amendment exists, that is not license for you to just say whatever comes across your mind and not anticipate a consequence. And unfortunately, since we do not have any laws on the books regarding internet regulations, that is, they have not been updated since, I want to say, 1996 or something to that effect. We are in this chasm of communication, in that it feels as if it's kind of like the Wild Wild West out there because of situations such as this. These teenagers should have been able to be regulated and to some degree regarding what they say and what they can't say, but because the laws haven't caught up to the technology, certainly haven't caught up to this neo-racism, so to speak, and that they're not on horses anymore. You know what I'm saying? But with the exception of the Ahmaud Arbery case, you don't necessarily have white people chasing black people in pickup trucks like they used to anymore. They're chasing them by way of Facebook. They're chasing them by way of Instagram and TikTok and harassing them in that way. But there's nothing regulating that. But specifically when it comes to the LA teens and the swatting, that takes it to a whole nother level, because it's not just about free speech. It's not just about the communication of your ideas and how they combat with someone else. That's taxpayers' dollars being wasted. SWAT team is no joke. You have tens of people coming to the house expecting basically terrorist level emergencies, and only to find that it's someone just chilling in their house, as they are allowed to do. They have the right to do that. And the trauma that is incurred on, honestly, both sides of that. SWAT doesn't want to go to a house that doesn't need their help. And certainly people who are in their homes don't want SWAT in their house when they don't need SWAT in their house. So, and all of that is paid by tax people's dollars. So it's, the teenagers are being infantile here. They're being treated like true ignorant children. They knew exactly what they were going to do, but we are really babying them and coddling them, very likely because of their whiteness. And in any other case, they would be, upheld, like anything would be held to the highest extent of the law regarding their actions. Same with Kyle Rittenhouse.
I want to try to fit this in before we get out of time, but I also don't want to undermine the seriousness of the charges.
Back to that Roland Mark unfiltered video in just one moment.
time to be smart.
Roland Martin's doing this every day.
Oh, no punches!
Thank you, Roland Martin, for always giving voice to the issues.
Look for Roland Martin in the whirlwind, to quote Marcus Garvey again.
The video looks phenomenal, so I'm really excited to see it on my big screen.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
I got to defer to the brilliance of Dr. Carr and to the brilliance of the Black Star Network.
I am rolling with Roland all the way.
Honored to be on a show that you own. A black man owns the show.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
I'm real revolutionary right now. Roland was amazing on there.
Stay black. I love y'all.
I can't commend you enough about this platform that you've created for us to be able to share who we are, what we're doing in the world, and the impact that we're having.
Let's be smart. Bring your eyeballs home.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
You dig?